Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's CircleCI Orb's partner webinar with NowSecure. I'm Rose Kaplan-Bomberg. I'm a community and partner engineer at CircleCI, and we have Brian Reed, Chief Mobility Officer at NowSecure, to go through delivering secure mobile apps faster with NowSecure and CircleCI Orbs. So feel free to use the Q&A at any point during the webinar, and if it's a question that seems like it can be answered in the flow of things, we might address it right away. Otherwise, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session after the slides. Yeah, and we'll just start by going through some general Orb stuff, and then I'll hand it over to Brian to talk about NowSecure's Orb. You can go to the next slide too. So what is an orb? If you are in this webinar, you probably know to some degree, but just to reiterate, orbs are a way to easily share and reuse your CircleCI configuration, which enables you to share specific functionality with the wider developer community and also within your own organization or the open source team. You can go to the next slide. So here's a simple example. So three main features of orbs would be commands, executors, and jobs. So you can predefine these in your orb, and then they can be used by anyone who's using your orb. You can go to the next slide too. And here's a list of some of our initial partners, a lot of folks in the DevOps space. And at the end, I'll talk briefly about how you can also become a technology partner of CircleCI and get your orb listed in the registry. You can go to the next slide. So with that, I will hand it over to Brian to talk about NowSecure.
So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Brian Reed, the Chief Mobility Officer here at NowSecure. I've been doing mobile and apps and security for 15, almost 20 years. And so I'll be your tour guide on today's conversation. We at NowSecure have been partnered with CircleCI for a while, and largely, I think because of the core markets where CircleCI is definitely a best-of-breed solution when it comes to building mobile apps. So we work with organizations and DevOps teams who are focused on building and deploying mobile applications, be it for internal or external use and publishing in an app store. And one of the things we found in our customer base was that CircleCI was frequently the tool chain of choice as a result of all of the great functionality they built into the platform around working with iOS and Android and the ecosystem of mobile tools that are all part of the build process here. So whether it's working with Fastlane or working with Homebrew, direct integration with iTunes for deployment and management. And so we're excited to be working with CircleCI now as we expand functionality together and move from a simple API integration now into an Orb integration. And we'd like to thank them for encouraging us to join the program. So as a little bit of background on us, we've been doing app security testing, pen testing, and mobile forensics since 2009. Over the years, we've moved from tools that enable an analyst to do the work to fully automated tools in the cloud or on-prem that plug into the dev tool chain like CircleCI, Jira, and many of the other tools you might be using. A little bit of background, a lot of advanced networking and application security tools have been created by our research team that are out in the open source world. But our development team for our products actually comes from building high volume, high reliability training systems. And so you get this great combination of advanced security technology and high throughput, high scale, advanced technology approaches to an engineering discipline from building high volume trading systems, which allows us to bring together this amazing combination of advanced security and fully automated testing that scales. So, big challenge for many organizations is, and I was on the application development side working with customers, is the mobile teams move fast, they build fast. We have some customers who release production app store apps every day. We have some that release on a classic agile 2-week cycle, and some that might be more like quarterly or annually. And for many organizations, that speed and velocity of driving fast is why you bring in CircleCI and many of these other tools. But there's always this hurdle around security. And so what we've really been focused on here in the last 2 years is building a fully automated system that allows us to plug into the tool chain and run security hands-free and actually enable an integrated test of complete security coverage, basically a complete pen test, to run in less than 15 minutes. And that allows you to then get that pipeline velocity with the security coverage built into the organization. And so as we think about the tool chain, right, today's tool chain can count 10, 20 different tools. And so, when we work with organizations, we try to work with plugging into their CI and all the other associated tools that might be part of the process. And all of you have some sort of diagram like this. I'm sure that's your tool chain workflow and how applications get built. Clearly, the central hub in this is your CI/CD, and that's actually what runs the chain, and then your code repos like GitHub that stores all your information. And so as we work our way through, how do you actually shift left and how do you actually build automated security in? There's a lot of different techniques that you can apply, right? So looking at source code scanning, you can look at security ID plugins, you can look at other types of SCA or component third-party open source library vetting and many other approaches. But in the end, it's all about speed, right? How do I get speed and scale when it comes to building and delivering those applications that my business and my customers need? And that's really what we're focused on. And what's often happened that causes this sort of testing challenge is there's really two parts to this friction that's created in the build and development cycle. So, on one side, and if, for those of you who are developers, I'm sure you've lived this, SAST is nice because it runs hands-free, but the problem is that you get lots of high false positives that then you have to chase down. But not testing and waiting till the end is even worse because, internal testing or outsourced pen testing at the 11th hour pre-release, that doesn't scale either, and that winds up screwing up the whole development process. And the last thing in the world you want to do is, release code that's got no security testing at all. But again, it's all about the velocity from left to right of getting new innovative features or new kinds of applications out into the wild. And so NowSecure takes a little different approach, which is how do you build it into the pipeline, right? And that's really where the best practice is. And that's why so many organizations are looking at many of these integrated tools, right? Integration into the tool chain, API driven, leveraging Orb technology and the other APIs that are a fundamental part of this ecosystem. And now security becomes part of that infrastructure built into the process. And when you build it in, what you really want to ideally do, of course, is test every build every day. Right? If you can build it, you should be able to test it. When you build it, you do integration testing, you do functional testing, you do unit testing. Of course, you should do security testing as part of it. And testing the binary is a great way to do it because then that gives you kind of the coverage that you need to really understand the full behaviors. And then, of course, you want to generate the tickets so that devs can go fix the bugs that you find that are security-centric bugs. So the first sort of pillar of strategy then is plugging into the tool chain, making sure that the devs get what they need from the code side of the house, and then all the dashboards are fed, in terms of your management infrastructure that you're using to actually drive the overall process to get you from build to release. Now, the other part of the security testing challenge, and for those of you developers, you're not swimming in this, but your security teams are, is all the places that things can break, all the places that bad guys can attack. Right before I walked into this room, I was walking past one of our security researchers screamed and said, "Come look at this." And we found a mobile app that many of you might be using that has multiple vulnerabilities in it. We're actually able to use our forensic tools to figure out it doesn't even look like it's ever really been security tested beyond a little bit of SAST, right? So how do you make sure that data at rest, data in motion, all those other natural things are tested, as part of the process? But again, if you're trying to run the pipeline, it's about how you get speed out of the pipeline. And so automation is how you get there, right? Integration to plug it in, make it hands-free. Automation is you just make the thing run and cover all the things that need to be covered. And so, when dev and DevOps teams look at it, they're excited because of the automation and the seamless integration with CircleCI. When security guys look at it, they're like, hey, this is awesome. This covers everything we need and maybe even more than what we're doing today. So NowSecure plugs into the dev tool chain and plug into CircleCI and Jira for the pre-production process. It actually also plugs into Google Play and iTunes. So when you're building apps for public use and deployment in the global markets, then we actually monitored it in production as well. And so now we're able to help you build security in and really collapse that time cycle. Under the hood, we're running a full SAST and DAST run. So it's dynamic testing as well as static testing of the full binary running on real devices in the cloud. We've actually built our own little mini CI inside of NowSecure that is how we actually take your apps from your app factory, literally tear them down, stick them on the device, test them, spew out the results, and do all of that in 15 minutes or less. And because we're doing dynamic testing on real devices, our attacker tool actually allows us to give you high accuracy. So we have like a 99 point something % accuracy rate on what we find, along with a very high 90% plus coverage rate in this automated testing. So we're excited to be able to work with, organizations like you. What I'd like to do is give you a little bit of experience of what it's like to work within work with our orb within CircleCI. Now, for those of you who do online demos, there's always risk in actually trying to do a live demo. So just to make life easier, I've gone ahead and took screenshots of our environment. And so this is one of our DevOps engineers actually, who's running in our test environment where we test our orb within CircleCI. It's a very, very straightforward configuration. You simply go into the orb store, add it to your projects, and then you step your way through it. So here we can see I've now got the basic environment started, and I'm going to now go through and do the full configuration. Then I'm actually going to do a test run. So here's our starting point. As I move down into it then, so build is completed, right? So in your workflow, code check-in was done. You may have done some other scanning. Then you start the build cycle. Build cycle completes. Here you can actually see now in CircleCI where the environment's being spun up to start, attaching then to the workspace, checking the code, grabbing the APK here. It's an Android test. Then attaching to the workspace and connecting back into our infrastructure in the cloud. And then you're off and running. And if you look down there, you'll actually see 12 minutes and 46 seconds later, the test is actually done, and then the data and information is persisted back, artifacts are shipped back, and you're off and running. For anyone who's actually been around security testing before, the whole notion of doing a full pen test in like 13 minutes with no human involved is kind of crazy earth science. But when we look at some of our customers who were able to go from code commit to production in just a few hours, you have to have tools that can run fast like this, and that's what we can do. Now, this is clearly a successful process. We can also break the build, reroute ticketed information, whatever sort of necessary to fit your workflow and cycle. And of course, you can tune it to your environment. And then here you get the bucket of artifacts. All our primary test results come back into JSON. They also can come back in other formats, and then you can feed them directly into Jira or another tool that you might be using for your ticket and issue tracking. We find most organizations are using Jira as a ticketing system. And so now you have a closed loop capability, right? So automate the build, which I showed you at the beginning. Build then automatically launches the test. The test ran in 13 minutes. Test is done. Here's all our artifacts as a result of the test, and you're able to then feed them or pipe them on a test level, on a finding level, or an entire app level into a ticketing system like Jira, and you're off and running. And so what's really cool about it is you're basically running it in a fully headless mode, and that's why most customers use us. Now, if you're a point and click kind of person and you want to go look at sample tests, of course, you can log into NowSecure directly. So here's an example of one of our sample test apps. I picked this one because I thought it was interesting. One of the things developers and security people are frequently worried about is credentials. So here's a test app that exposes credentials. You can see password, username, Android ID. It's even got like an old database SQL injection issue and some other things in it. So the way we actually run under the hood is we have a security scoring model. We use the security language that people typically use on the testing side is CVSS scoring. Those CVSS scores are then added up. We give you a score that's kind of like being in grade school. So 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, 70 to 80 is a C, and so on and so forth. Anything below 60 is a fail. This is yucky. This is a 25. So you're in a pretty bad space. But again, I think any of us would say that any app that's actually leaking password, username, and ID information is really bad, so you want to fix that. Now, for the DevOps people on the phone, developers on the phone, you're not going to be living in this environment, but this is here as you need it. If you really want to dig in and understand how the security testing works, certainly for the security analysts, you might be wanting to check up on this as well. And as I said, all of this is available by API, so that you could just feed it into your vuln management tools, your CI dashboards, into your other ticketing systems, or wherever else you basically need to route this information in order to get it to the right people so they can do what they need to do to address their issues. Now, when we dig into this, just to give you a little flavor of the findings, one of the nice things about this is that even though it's a security testing tool, we're really speaking to the developers. So you can see here for the sensitive data password, I went ahead and blew it out. And down here, you can see the recommendations section. So inside here, we provide you recommended coding instructions and strategy instructions, depending on what the issues are. We also may include links to other sources, depending on iOS, Android, and what your issues are. This one doesn't have a link to additional sources. We also map it to regulatory things. So as a developer, you may not care, but your security compliance and risk teams might care. So when we find a finding, we tag that for you as well, and then give you all the information you need. So you can see all the way at the bottom here, when we feed the ticket in, you're going to get the actual full URL. You're going to get what the data was, the sample user ID and password we were looking for, and how we found it, and then over-the-air man-in-the-middle attack style snooping. And so clearly that is not a good thing. So then everybody, you know, it's all about metrics. So within NowSecure, you can see all your mobile app security metrics. All this data feeds into your other dashboarding tools as well through our APIs, through JSON, XML, what have you. Consume it in Splunk, consume it in a Vuln tool, consume it in CircleCI or wherever else you want it. Gives you all that natural tracking and history that you want to look for. How's my team performing? Are my builds getting more secure or less secure, and what have you. So everything you need from a visual experience is here. And as I said before, all of the power of NowSecure is available through the CircleCI Orb. It's a drop and click thing. Literally, you're up and running in 10 minutes. Very simple to configure, and then you're able to start testing right away. So now what we're actually able to help you do is really full life cycle testing, which is really great. So we can triage. For a lot of organizations, they'll just start with triaging, right? So your team may already have apps in the App Store. You can just go grab them out of the App Store, run them through the tool, see what state you're in, immediately create some tickets and feed them back to the development team. You don't even have to configure an orb just to do an on-demand test here. And so then, you know, maybe you want to experiment with it before you go full on, full auto. So you can manually upload a binary, pull it out of an app store, pull it out of a repo, wherever you're going to get it from, run that test, get the results, look at the results, and then say, hey, go submit tickets. When you're ready, you kind of turn it on in the fully automated mode, plugged into CircleCI and your favorite ticketing system. And then, you know, all of the management dashboards will get populated with all the metrics and all the data coming out of the security layer of testing that we're doing here. So you can correlate that with everything else going on in your status and your boards. Of course, we can break a build. You can set different thresholds and so on and so forth to decide what break a build is. And then once you're into production, we can also monitor your production app in an internal or external app store. Now, some interesting things happen as you push apps through and into iTunes and Google Play. So it's a good risk mitigation strategy to monitor that, and that all runs in the same environment. So instead of being fed from CircleCI, it's fed from iTunes or Google Play if you need to. And of course, you know, one of the other things we offer here, we are products and services. We have a number of organizations who will run us in an automated tool chain like this. They'll maybe come back for an annual pen test. Maybe you need it for regulatory reasons because you're in banking and finance, or maybe you have a corporate policy that says, hey, we also need an outsourced pen test. We can certainly help you with that as well and feed that same data into all the other result sets. So what we see for many organizations is, you know, the notion of CI/CD for continuous integration, continuous delivery is all about automate everything at every point you can. And so what we're here to help you do is to automate the security testing piece of that mobile app development toolchain to really get you CI/CD and CS, as it were. So start with the triage, right? Really easy to do it. Now automate the testing and the builds, and then really look into the metrics and the analytics to see what you can do to improve that closed loop continuous security. We've got heat maps and pattern tools. We can look and slice this by developer team, by build team, by other technology components that you might be using. And so all the analytics on top of this allows you to really, you know, figure out how to make your organization perform the best, see how all the technology is performing under the hood, and then obviously improve the security and capabilities of the applications you're delivering either to the employees or to the public markets or what have you. And all the magic that happens here is because of the integration throughout the complete tool chain. So what I'd like to do is talk, you know, a little bit about a case study, and this is your classic adoption curve. So this is representative of one of our customers who shall remain nameless. Many of you might be using their applications. And so they started in a, you know, manual build, agile driven manual testing environment. They're using functional testing tools and a variety of other tools. And so they started moving into continuous, leveraging CircleCI and other tools. They're kind of a mid-sized company, and CircleCI was perfect for them. And because they had a very mobile-centric bent, they do have web apps, but they're really a mobile app that happens to have a web interface too. They wanted to have the right tooling. And so they moved classically through this cycle. And what's interesting about it is from manual testing to pre-release testing into on-demand testing was just a simple 3 months adoption cycle. Now they're in a world that's dependent on regulated financial institutions and things like that. So they had to make sure they stepped through this carefully. They wanted to make sure they understood the performance patterns. They wanted to make sure that they could continue to increase the throughput and the release cycles of their application while incrementally adding security at the same time. And so it was very interesting to work with them because they were actually accelerating their cycles independent of the security initiative. And the security team was basically racing to keep up with them, right? Racing to help them move faster and really eliminate the barrier. And the security team is really now viewed as an advisory group, right? And they work more in partnership with the developers and the DevOps team as opposed to the Department of No or the Department of Slow. And what's really cool today, and I recently visited them a few weeks ago, is seeing how they run headless, seeing how they run in a fully automated mode. They're spending more time, not focusing on security bugaboos, and they're focusing on the other things they're trying to do to really get to a continuous delivery mode. Now, they typically release an app every 1 or 2 weeks, but they know they can go, especially for a patch, they can go from build to production in less than 3 hours. And that's a really big deal for many organizations. And we help them eliminate security barrier. Clearly, they did a lot of other things to improve their environment as well. So here we are about a year into it, and they're running in a fully optimal mode, which is really great. And the developers actually love the feedback they get pretty immediately every time they check in on the new, on a new build or on a new release cycle, which really helps them drive the business forward with the metrics that they're trying to achieve within their cycle. So kudos to them. And so, like we frequently like to do this is really share some best practices recommendations. I talked earlier about our DevOps team, internal DevOps team comes from financial services institutions. So online hedge fund trading systems that, have mobile apps, and the mobile apps are award-winning apps used by hedge fund managers and day traders and things like that. And we've learned a lot as a company in terms of evolving from being tools for a security analyst to being tools for an automated DevOps toolchain, or really for a development team in the full life cycle. And so, all of these things you may see as a typical path that you would take with DevOps in general, right? So reducing the risk through incremental development. We try to enable that, right? So being able to test every build every day, you'll want to do that, but it's most important to really look at risk mitigation by moving to incremental, which is at the core, of course, of DevOps. Automate everything you can do and use tools to get there, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy for anything to be manual these days. You want everything to be hands-free, using the systems, using the tool chain. That's why I think the API economy that's running around these tool chains is so important. Myself and our head of sales, we both grew up in the Java days. And so it's interesting as we look at what's going on now with development, it very much reminds us of those early and mid days of Java, J2EE, Java Beans, web-based, and network-based applications and multi-tier distributed application architectures and all that, right? We would have loved to have this level of technology. We were with BA WebLogic, and we're able to leverage that, and that's kind of like the first example of something like what has now become today's modern tool chain. And so excited about how this is evolving now. And the reality is that now we have the capacity to do these kinds of things and let the tools do the work for you. We're big believers in the cloud. All our tech can run on-prem, but take advantage of the cloud, of course. I mean, there's so much gain you get. One of the most amazing things for me in the journey here is that we have big device farms that are behind our infrastructure. We run in AWS. We have device farms in a couple different data centers that we use because we're testing on real devices. But the power and the ability of the cloud to really move mountains is great. Don't spend the time fighting the tech stack on the back end and provisioning hardware and server infrastructure and all the rest. Take advantage of that. We do very heavily, so we can scale, dynamically, horizontally and vertically to hit our customer needs. We can do routing to hit their needs. We can do data deployment anywhere. And we encourage everyone to take advantage of the cloud infrastructure to really move it. And so we look at the world as a mobile cloud world connected to your back end wherever it lives. Automated testing is the way to go, right? If you sort of look at what's happened with QA, with functional testing and unit testing and integration testing, right? The path through Agile to CI/CD and really continuous delivery has been already run through from a functional testing perspective. There's some great automation tools out there. They use a mixture of techniques and technologies that allow you to do an amazing amount of automated testing as you run through the build, test, and then pre-prod and prod type scenario, right? Why not include security testing in that same path where you're doing the functional unit and integration testing? It's just a natural thing to do. And so, the market just had to catch up, and now there are automation tools that will allow you to do that in a very comparable way. So if you're investing in functional automation testing or automated functional testing, automated UI, UX testing, you should be doing the same thing when it comes to the security side as well. And that'll really help you get big gains, right? It's kind of interesting to have conversations with folks about what's a worse bug, a security bug or a usability issue in UX testing. I think the risk team would scream the security bug. I think that the marketing team might scream the user experience issue, but the reality is you need to do it all. And then the last thing is that there are many places that emulators are great, and mobile is not one of them. One of the interesting things for me on the journey, and as I've heard this from the customers, is customers will try to test with emulators and use automation around emulators. And what winds up happening is you get 10, 20, 30% code coverage when you test on an emulator. Testing on real devices the way we do is really important because that gives you the real world experience. So literally think about this, right? We can grab a production app from iTunes or Google Play. We can grab a pre-prod app that you're ready to load into iTunes or Google Play. We pull it down and we install it on a standard device. And then we run this battery of tests on it and we pound the heck out of it. And when you're doing that, you're really getting the real world experience. So what's going on with the third-party libraries? What's going on with the recent lines of code that you added? What endpoints are you talking to? Do you know where those endpoints are? Hey, did you know that endpoint was going to China? Did you know that third-party library you have is actually sharing data over HTTP and not using SSL encrypted connections? Is CERT pinning wrong? I mean, all of those kinds of things, especially the over-the-air and app to back end are much better tested in the real world on real devices versus using things like source code and all the rest. So there's a handful of best practices, recommendations for you. We encourage you to take advantage of them. Of course, there's plenty of good books to read about this and resources to leverage. And as you go through your journey, you're welcome to come to NowSecure.com and read our blog and some of our development guidelines. We have lots of resources for you to help you down this path as well. We're very happy to be part of today's conversation with you here around the NowSecure Orb for CircleCI and leveraging the best of CircleCI to really power your mobile application development so you can deliver those apps faster. So here we are up at Q&A time. I think we may have a few here. So Rose, feel free to ask me some questions here and we'll roll forward.
Yeah, sure. Two main ones for you right now, I think. The first one is, do you have test accounts to review the automated tests that your system is performing on various apps and any kind of bug bounty programmed for folks to report issues?
Great question. So first off, when you use NowSecure, you can either run it in what we call authenticated or non-authenticated mode. So authenticated mode means you configure a test account of your own. So you may have backend data, that you're going to hit that might be prod or not prod. And so you can either just point, click, start, run, or configure a test account. Most people have test accounts they want to route behavior to. As part of configuring that test account, you can also configure other kinds of information. Maybe there's other key fields like a customer ID or something else you might need to feed in. So like many kinds of functional testing tools, it's very straightforward to configure and run and gun. You can even pull that stuff in and pass it through APIs. So if you have a separation of powers issues or you have different teams using different test accounts, you can configure that through our RBAC environment as well. Bug bounty is a great question. So we do believe hugely in bug bounty programs. We do work with the leading bug bounty guys. We encourage everyone to do that. In terms of working with us, like if you actually found a bug in my own tech, you can hit us up online and we're happy to take a look at it. We have people banging on us a lot. We do work with 2 of the bug bounty programs just to security test our own backend and our own tech as well. So configuration is easy. A lot of people run it out of the box. You can then configure more and more detail depending on what you're trying to do and what your different test scenarios are.
Cool. So one more question. I think you had an answer to this in one of your earlier slides, but just to confirm, is there a way to have your system just test binaries as opposed to being integrated into the kind of pre-deployment process?
Yeah.
I think the answer is yes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you think about test velocity, when you think about risk, right, there's really 2 fundamental ways to test. You can test your components of source, right? So whether it's third-party source or source that you've written, and there's great SaaS tools for that and SCA tools for that, and we're partners with lots of those vendors and see them running in parallel. And then there's test the binary, and the difference with testing the binary is then you're testing everything inline just the way it actually was compiled and just the way it's actually used. So we're big believers in no matter what you do, you should test that binary to get the complete code coverage. We encourage you to do source code scanning, third-party library scanning as well. That can improve your overall security score as you build out your sort of layered defense strategy. But testing binary is the key, and that's why we plug into CircleCI on the back end and run after the build, generally in parallel to or serially with the functional and unit testing that also occurs.
Cool. There's one last question. Do you think we can make this slideshow available to folks?
Yeah,
I think
I'm
for the
happy to
circle
make
slides,
it.
it's fine.
Yeah, we're happy to make it available. I think also a pointer for everybody is that we do have a full blog that's also available. So we authored a blog on the CircleCI blog where you can get a lot of the information I have today, including the step-by-step tutorial to get yourself plugged in. By all means, go have a look at the orb from the CircleCI registry. Right there you go is your link. And then in order to use the orb, you actually have to plug into our back end. So there's a quick link for you here to get your way into a demo or trial environment so you can test the full life cycle. And we encourage everybody to have a look at it. We're very excited about the expanded partnership and this orb ability. It's now, configure 3 variables, load some code, and you're off and running, which makes it really great to just get started literally tomorrow if you wanted to really see what automated security testing of binaries in your dev cycle really is like.
And maybe we will try to get the slideshow link added to the YouTube video, which will be up on YouTube later today. And also we could try to get that added to the blog post. There was one previous question which I answered over text, but just to say it out loud, someone asked if we support iOS 12 for in-device tests on Circle. The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped a link to our Mac OS image information in the Q&A. And then we've got one new question. Do you support app thinning while testing binaries?
So I support app, what was that word?
Thinning?
F-I-N-N-I-N-G. They might have tried to say fuzzing.
T-H-I-N-N-I-N-G.
Oh, yes. So yes, we do during the test process. It all depends. You can test pretty much anything. You can compile it into a binary. We can test it. And we can test. There's a lot of depth that goes into what's going on under the hood as part of the testing process. So yes, we do.
Cool. Any last questions from any of the folks on the webinar? Brian, you want to go to the next slide with all the circle links? I think the one after this. There you go. So this is all the links that you would need to get started with orbs in general. You can take a look at the registry, take a look. Most of our orbs are open source and on GitHub. And if you're interested in becoming a technology partner, you can check out that link down at the bottom. We just have a simple Google form to fill out, and we'll be in touch with you. We have a pretty active community on Discuss for folks working with orbs or writing orbs or using orbs. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And Yeah, this will be up on YouTube later today.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to have you along the ride today.
Oh, you want to go to the last slide, which I think has our emails, right?
There we go.
So feel free to email either of us also if you have any further questions.
Very good. Feel free to send me an email and look forward to working on the journey with all of you.